to Write Your Book Your Way, the interview series that goes behind the scenes of real self-published books to explode the myth that there's a right way to write your book and to give you the freedom to write in a way that feels good to you and gets it finished. I'm Kris Emery, owner and lead editor at Kris Emery Editorial, and I'll be interviewing my past clients, all first-time non-fiction writers and entrepreneurs, to show you how you can do this, or could do this. Today I'm talking with Dr. Susie Gronski, who I worked with as editor on her book, Pelvic Pain, The Ultimate Cockblock. Specialising in men's pelvic and sexual health, Susie Gronski, PT, DPT, is a licensed doctor of physical therapy, certified pelvic rehabilitation practitioner, international teacher, and creator of one-to-one and self-paced health programs that help men with pelvic pain become experts in treating themselves. Today's episode is special because we have worked together on a second edition of her book to update the science and reinvigorate sales. Here's an insight into the process of writing a health book and republishing a second edition after a period of self-growth. Okay, well, we're here today with Susie Gronski and we're just going to dive straight into the questions that I have for her. So, hi, Susie, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Hi, Kris. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. I want to get into the questions around just like what your book is about to start with and how it relates to your business and what the purpose of the book was, so that everyone watching can see what kind of book we're dealing with, and then also a bit of, well, we'll get into a bit of the strategy and the process behind it. So how does your book relate to your business?
Yes, thank you. So my book is called Pelvic Pain, The Ultimate Cockblock. It's a no bullshit guide for men to navigating through pelvic pain. So that can include sexual pain, penis pain, testicular pain, groin pain, anywhere in that area or the abdomen that is persisting for 3 months or longer. And it pertains to my business because I am a licensed doctor of physical therapy, so physiotherapist, and a sexual health counselor and educator. So I work predominantly with men who have sexual pain in their nether regions. And so this book was a manifestation of my work and an inspiration for an inspiration from all the men who have reached out to get help for their concerns.
Yeah, so you also have some courses as well around this kind of thing, and you help other physical therapists to understand this particular area and your particular approach as well. Do you want to tell everyone about that too?
Yeah, so I have an online course these days. Used to be in person, but it's online now. It's called Sexual Pain, Navigating Care for Cisgender Men. And believe it or not, in the physiotherapy world, not every therapist who works in pelvic health actually knows how to work with men, because it is not part of the traditional curriculum for this type of specialty. Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I realized that and decided to take the reins on that to help other therapists be comfortable with working with, especially female identified therapists who work with men, to be comfortable with working with people of the opposite gender who have different parts, genital parts, without sexualizing a body, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
So that takes some crafting and experience and guidance to do that. And so the course that I have goes through all the details around sexual pain and what a person who has a penis may experience, and then going into some treatment strategies for that and how to work in that type of supportive partnership. So that's the online course for health professionals. And then I have an online self-paced course for men who are experiencing sexual pain as well, that really piggybacks off of the book in video format. It's actually a 6-week course that men can take to treat themselves and get ideas as far as how to work with sexual pain in the comforts of their own home, because it can be quite intimidating to reach out to a health professional for sexual health related issues and concerns. And so a lot of men will often Google and try to self-diagnose and self-treat. And I figured, well, we should have some quality information to help these guys, because the internet can be quite a scary place. It's helpful. It's like a double-edged sword, it's helpful. And also it can lead you to some doom scrolling and just catastrophizing of the situation when there's actually a lot of hope for recovery. And that's really what my book Pelvic Pain: The Ultimate Cock Block is about, is hope and recovery, that there, no matter how long you've been in pain, that there's possibility for change.
Yeah. And I think that reaching out is particularly difficult when you've got the physical and the emotional kind of mesh together, and your book really goes into quite some depth explaining, why the physical and the emotional cannot be separated out. It's not just a mechanical thing, but I guess guys are very the people that you serve are very much looking for a solution, but they don't know where sort of to start with this. Is it a physical thing? Is it I wonder, do the people that work with you even consider that it starts from an emotion? Is the entry point ever an emotional place for them, or is it
not initially? Not initially. And we can't really say that is a cause. I mean, there's a lot of links and relationships that we can connect to physical symptoms, and we know that there's such a huge there's such a huge connection between the two, but we can't necessarily say that emotional or psychological distress is a cause for any one symptom or illness or disease, although it certainly doesn't help when you have emotional or psychological distress, which often comes alongside of having a very clinically enigmatic diagnosis that is chronic pelvic pain syndrome, or otherwise known as chronic prostatitis in men, that there isn't really a known cause. And so when you don't have that, I don't really know what's going on, that can create for a lot of turmoil in one's life. And also it's a threat that continues to be lingering. And so when you don't have an explanation or knowledge about what's going on in our bodies, and we're really not taught to begin with about our bodies and how they work, right? If you're not in the medical field or in a field that goes through that
emotional relationships.
Right, exactly. And so there's, it's hard for people to kind of connect the two. But to your question about, how is that the first thing that people connect with? No, not really. It's really about, okay, what's biologically going wrong with me? Is there something wrong with my body? Let's fix it. Whereas the manifestation of your physical symptoms could very well be from a lot of emotional or psychological distress, because that is it does manifest as a physiological response. And that's where people kind of get really hung up on that, because you can't physically see those parts working underneath the hood, so to speak. We can't see our cells and our neurons and our nerves firing, and all these connections and hormones, receptor sites and all that. What we see is my hand, I'm squeezing my hand, I'm opening my hand, I'm bending my elbow, I'm straightening my elbow. Cause A, A plus B equals C. There's a direct link where when you can see it. And if you can't see it, then that becomes a bit abstract for people to wrap their head around, that nothing lives in a vacuum. And it really is this interconnected, interdependent situation, no matter what it is.
So with it being that complex, how did you go about structuring a book that needs to break something down very methodically for somebody to be able to pick up and from page one know that this is going to help them? And what you showed before was actually the second edition of your book. So if you can remember right back to when you actually first started writing the first edition of your book, how do you synthesize all of this
nebulous information into a neat little package? Where do you start with that?
Oh, that's a big
Am I
question,
giving you a
Kris.
headache even remembering?
Right. Yes, you're taking me back. Memories. I have to say that the initial, let's go to the first edition. What prompted that was doing my own anecdotal clinical research when men started to reach out to me to ask for help. Like, you're listing these things on your website. I was actually, I guess, to give some context around that, I first started my practice working with women and doing women's health and pelvic health because traditionally that was the focus, 10 odd years ago. And men were reaching out because they had experienced similar symptoms and complaints, and asked if I can help them. And so that's kind of where it started, was listening to their stories. It was the narratives, their stories that really guided the structure of the book. And so I had literally just asked them, what could you have used in your quest to get help that would have been helpful for you to know sooner than later? And once I gathered that information, I realized, well, first, there isn't a lot of information on what really is chronic pelvic pain syndrome in men. There was a huge myth and misnomer around the diagnosis of chronic prostatitis, because when one hears that, it sounds like it's inflammation of the prostate gland, when in fact, when you have chronic pelvic pain syndrome, it may have nothing to do with your prostate at all. So the label that these men were receiving from the traditional medical community was really misleading and misguiding, which means when you don't have an accurate diagnosis or a more clear picture of what may be going on, then the treatment approaches and options are also going to follow suit. And so men would be receiving tons of antibiotic treatments, unnecessary medications that actually may be, what we know now, are potentially contributing to more of the chronicity of this issue rather than an actual help. And so that's kind of where I started, of like, let's define what this is if we can. I mean, I know there isn't a single known cause for it, but let's put in some of the potential, what we do know as far as what the research is saying, which isn't a lot, but it does evolve slowly. And I wanted to define those terms in a way, again, that says this isn't permanent. Because the other thing to this book is that many men have been told that it's either all in their head, because there is no diagnostic scan to show you that this is where you're having pain and this is the cause. And so when that's not clearly visible in the traditional biomedical sense, then it must be all psychological, and this is all psychological. And so again, there's this dichotomy or this binary way of thinking in that sense, that it's all or nothing, or it's not this, then it must be that. Whereas you mentioned earlier so well, is that it's not just biological, it's not just psychological. They're interdependent on one another and can contribute to the current lived experience of pain. So that's the first section. And then we go on to explaining some of the neuroscience or the science behind pain itself, no matter where it is in the body. And
anyone, like,
yes,
I remember at the time I first edited your first edition, I was suffering from tendonitis in my under my foot, ankle kind of area, and it just blew open the whole box. I was just like, oh my god, I need to find out more about that. So yeah, sorry, carry on. I just had to
no, that's of course,
it was such amazing information.
And your experience is the experience of many people who have pain, because again, in the traditional sense, we think, well, pain is a result of something wrong in my tissues, and the amount of pain that I experience is dependent on how much damage there is. Well, that turns out to be really false, because you can have a paper cut and it hurts really, really, really bad, and your whole finger and a whole area around that might, or a hangnail, it hurts really bad, but that doesn't mean that you have like your finger's not cut off, right? Or another example of that is a sunburn. You go into a hot shower, you burnt you got a sunburn on your back, but it hurts really bad when you get into that hot shower, and eventually like your body gets used to that temperature. But just because the intensity of that pain has increased, it doesn't mean that you're increasing the amount of your sunburn in the shower.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like using real life experiences like that. Or another one is if pain in a limb that doesn't exist. When someone has an amputation or congenitally is born without a limb, those people also experience pain in a limb that isn't there. So, all these things kind of lead you to be like, oh, wow, our notions of pain traditionally, leading back to all, scientists like Descartes, who said, I touch a hot stove and it's this very simple input equals output. And it's really not that simple. It's actually much more complex. So the book I tried my best to really break it down into simplistic terms without oversimplifying, because that would discredit the complexity and sophistication of these systems. But in a way that can be relatable to the reader to actually start thinking about pain from a different context and a different lens, rather than this like, there must be damage, there must be harm, which is actually quite liberating if you think about it. I guess it depends on your perspective, that if I'm thinking my body is in harm or in danger, I'm going to stop doing things that are important to me in life, and I'm going to put everything on hold, where we start to think about it in a way that's like, well, okay, I have pain. It's really a sensitivity. It's just a signal. I'm not really hurting myself more by participating in these activities. Then that pain actually, which seems counterintuitive, is actually going to decrease when you start to re-engage with life again and start to introduce things that you have avoided for fear of pain. So now you're using it more as an opportunity to dial down that pain, rather than help, keep you stuck and debilitated and further like in this rut. So it really it goes from a myopic vision of life to a very open and broad and panoramic view of what life can be, despite the pain.
Yeah. It certainly was a fascinating thing to read about pain. And I remember the lifestyle stuff that you started with, the sort of more anecdotal, I suppose, stuff that you started with in the first edition was really, really relatable to so many situations, even not pelvic pain in men, very relatable for everybody. But then you also get specific, and you talk specifically about this. Now I need to get the word right, not condition. Not condition, or is it condition? I can never remember. But you talk very specifically about persistent pain in the pelvic area in men. So your book is very niche in that respect, but when you relaunched it and did the second edition, can you talk to us about what prompted that edition, what you added, what you took out, and what changes you felt you needed to make for this particular audience, and why, sorry, this seems like lots of questions in one, but really why this niche audience needed something different the second time around, once you'd launched it the first time around.
Yeah, great question. That actually comes from a selfish motivation of trying to improve basically what I have now considered the first draft of the book, which was the first edition. But I am always learning, and in the medical world, I mean, things are always changing. You're learning new things and new insights. And as my knowledge and understanding of these very complex topics deepened, I found that there came a point 4 years-ish or 5 years later to say, this really needs an update, because I can really expand on some of the original topics that I had presented in the first edition. And also I found that words matter, and how we use our words and the language as far as framing certain concepts that I was describing in the book, those also needed to be changed, because again, my understanding of the science behind pain and the complexity of it really deepened. And so that needed to be reflected in the book, as far as the language and the word choices that were used. And so Kris and I worked on that really hard, because you're introducing such complex topics, but we didn't want to lose the fun and the colloquial, easygoing language and tone of the book either, right? Because it was very fun and straightforward and direct. And so sometimes that can get lost when you're using more medical scientific jargon.
Definitely.
So that took some finessing to
those two worlds. You do it really normally, like the way that you in your writing, like lots of little quips to kind of make people feel a bit more comfortable and that sort of thing.
Right.
But the difference as well for me, if it comes to language, in the second edition, is the attention we paid to stigmatizing language and language that could actually perpetuate the problem. So that layer went in. I feel like that not that it wasn't there the first time around, but that it wasn't a focus as much, because we were just too busy getting a book together, right? So
right.
And after all the extra learning that you did, and perspectives changing, we work with more people as well. I work with more people, I learn about language too. So that second time around felt like there was a lot of attention to that language, to be very careful that we were not sounding blamey or sounding like anybody was at fault. Or in particular, I remember you making it very, very clear that you didn't want to make them feel wrong about anything that they had done, were doing, could do, or any of that kind of thing as far as their pain was concerned. So yeah, that I remember that being a real huge motivation for the second edition too. I don't think in the first edition your language was in any way blaming, but we just needed to then make it a focus rather than just kind of going with it.
Yeah, and I know we did that through more of a reflective lens, because the second edition added more of the psychological point of view, like enmeshing the psychological and physical aspects of one's experience. And there's more to that. I'm oversimplifying, but it really had a more psychologically informed basis, where some of the questions that were posed in the first edition were more of like perhaps a tone of more direct tone, whereas now the questions that we reframed and added into the second edition were more of like what would it be like if you engaged in this activity a little bit, like just more getting the person to think, to like you as they're reading, to really kind of apply it to their own life and their own lifestyle, because they're really the experts of their own body and their own mind. So that, I think, that was
a muscle that they had to strengthen, to trusting their own body. So I feel like your readers in particular were people who had been told what to do a lot with their body. They've been everywhere. They've been to every therapist. They've been to every medical practitioner, and they have it up to here with the actual information, to the point where they maybe have lost a bit of trust in their body and in their ability to heal. So yeah, very like you say, it was a retrospective exercise. It wasn't like a completely new angle that we just never thought of before, but some sort of a layer that we needed to focus on. So the process, let's talk about the process from the point of view of the second edition, because like your first edition went quite naturally and got put out there, and then you made the choice to do this second edition, which was informed by all of the things that you learned, and we did a bit of back and forth doing it section by section. But what was it like going and applying all the research and writing new sections and trying to weave it into something that already existed? You can be honest.
Good question. I have to say, again, you're bringing me back down to memory lane here, which was energizing but also painstaking at the same time. In hindsight, I have to say that it was challenging to first go back and read your own work again, word for word, line by line. So there was a bit of tussling internal conflict of, oh, well, that was terrible. I don't even know why I wrote that. And, imposter syndrome and all that sort of thing, creeping up as a writer, which I'm sure I'm not alone on that when you have to read your work over and over again and be like, well, I could have done that differently. And, there's a certain amount of perfectionism that comes through, right? And so it was working with my own self during that process to say, that was then, that was who I was then, that was the message that was going out. And it at the end of the day, it helped people. And so it was okay, and people really enjoyed it and valued it. And so not to go in with that type of mindset for the second edition, as far as, having this relaxed intensity about it, not really judging myself as I was going through the work was really, really important. And so there was a resistance, especially in the beginning, to actually sit down and write, because I knew the amount of work it was going to take to really give this a makeover, because there's so much more research going into it, and especially adding research endnote, like the endnote process, because the first edition I didn't really link. I just had references in the back where, it was like, these are the references that I used to compile this first edition. They're all in the back. I never really linked those references to the actual text within the chapters. And so that was actually the most, I think, the challenging part of going back and reworking this, rather than just writing a whole new book. But I thought about that. It's like, and my husband said to me, you should have just created a second book. And I said, well, the topic's the same. I mean, there's really nothing new about, chronic prostatitis or chronic pelvic pain in that sense. I think I just need to add more to what I have. And so that interweaving process. So I had to literally go through those references and read them again to familiarize where did that reference come from? And when I said this line, where did that come from? Do I have research to back that up, what I'm saying, and that was really important for me for this edition, is to make sure that I have some literature or some sort of research to back up what I was saying in this book. Where am I getting these statistics from? And if somebody like a clinician or health provider who is reading this book, they can easily go to that research article and look up that article for their own self and read it and so forth. So I thought that was really important to add, but that also added a lot more work on my plate, as far as,
I think we got
not just writing
92 endnotes at one stage.
It was 200 to be exact, 264.
Wow.
References and in this book, which again is probably triple of what originally was presented, because I made it my job to do my due diligence, as far as I'm not just taking this from a clinical experience is very, of course, part of evidence-based research, of course, and research in itself has many of its own flaws because it's taken out of context and I won't get into that, but it really is not just about research. It's not just about clinical experience, and you have to also include the patient experience as part of this whole evidence-based approach that the second edition really focused on. So I really made it a purpose to be like, when I see this and give this recommendation, does this have any sound biologically plausible first evidence, and is there any research on this topic? And so I had to go back and do like a literature review and find more articles and research around what I'm saying, and also scrutinize the evidence as far as, well, is this really true now, even though there's evidence that show that this is not conclusive and it goes both ways. And so I really tried to be very neutral. And I think you probably picked up on that, Kris, too, that I didn't want to make claims that we couldn't be 100% certain or factual to back it up. And
well, you're in a regulated industry, right?
Right.
So you just can't. Nobody should be made.
Right. Well, people do.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because they do, especially in the realm of pelvic pain, because there's a lot of promises for cures. There's a lot of promises for, certain magic wands and treatments, where we really just don't have any evidence. There's a natural regression to people getting better. It's really not about what specifically they're doing. It's really about just the therapeutic relationship and helping that person feel comfortable and safe in their body, and coaching them and guiding them. So this book really took more of that like coaching, guiding perspective, also backed up by, can we really say that claim, and what does the research say about what we actually think about some traditionally held beliefs around health, like stretching, or around trigger point release and certain other manual therapies. And it is against the grain on a lot of people's point of view, I will say that. But it's something that I felt very compelled to say, like, hey, don't think you have to chase or blame your body, that you're not getting this special magic treatment. In fact, it really doesn't matter what you do, as long as you believe in what you're doing, and that it's safe, and that it's getting you to move forward and to live your life in the way that you want to live, to feel more empowered. So yeah, it's a long-winded answer to your question, but that was really the painstaking process.
Yeah, and I think the thoroughness really characterized it for me as well the first time around. Are you glad that you got it done, you got it out there, and you had gone through the process, even if you did?
I did. Yes, I did. Yes, 100%. Absolutely. Because there was even a resistance to write a book, because, and it's more of this self-evolving, self-actualization process of being a writer, because you have to really, put aside that imposter syndrome. You have to find your voice. And that was in the beginning of just even me stepping into the realm or owning the men's health realm, being a female as well. So just know that, not only am I coming up against, okay, I'm writing on a topic that I don't have a body part for, like I don't have a penis. I'm actually I'm stepping into the shoes of my patient, who is a male and identifies as male, and I'm writing through that perspective, through their lens. I mean, that in itself was such an eye-opening experience from an empathetic standpoint too, to develop this deep sense of compassion for, these individuals who have penises and experience sexual pain, what it's like to live in their world. And so I thought that was a fascinating part of the book writing process for me. And it was such a valuable part, because it not only enriched my personal life, but also my professional life. And I really got to know these people who are experiencing this type of pain. And hands down, from my website to the book to every touch point that I interact with these individuals, they will tell me, you are totally speaking, like, you're writing about me. You're writing about me.
That's awesome. I
almost feel like you could, like, are you sure you're not a guy? It's like, maybe in another life I may have been, but it's you've done a well enough job that the person who's reading it is really like, oh my gosh, I can totally relate. Yes, you're speaking my language. And that I thought was really cool. So that first edition was like the warm up for me to like really do the research, to interview people and all work with people. And then as I've gained more experience over the decade of working with men particularly, that has grown and certainly is reflected in the second edition. So yes, I am happy I wrote the first edition. I've learned so much about the book writing process through doing that as well.
I think that
And
puts
then
people
the second
off
time around,
sometimes doing a second one, or even doing a second edition. The fact that they know what to expect now, whereas the first time they were quite naive about it, so they were just like, yeah, just do this. Quite a lot of people
100%.
tell me that they're going to write a second book once they've worked with me the first time. They're like, yeah, I've got all these ideas. Very few actually follow through with the second book. It's something that I might be it's something that I might be going to do a little bit of a push on, because I think, you know, the resistance comes in really strongly for the second book.
I can see.
You know, you're not becoming an author for the first time, so you don't have that incentive.
Right.
But actually, books get read more the more books an author has. So you end up having a whole suite of books. So yeah, I'm probably going to be talking about that in the future. But I'm really pleased that you said that you're glad that you did the first one, because it feels like writing the book in the first place clarified a few things about your approach in your business, and sort of fed into your business, and then you could give back to it again and do the second one. And so many books through history have got multiple editions, and imagine if we were only doing the first one of those now, how many people would have missed out because it didn't get published years and years ago. I mean, the world is always going to change. We're always going to need to update stuff. Like you said about the medical profession, we're discovering new things all the time. You learn new things as a practitioner, and so books are going to evolve. So if anyone's wondering out there whether they should just bite the bullet and put their book out, or if they're, you know, maybe sitting waiting and thinking, oh, I need to know more, I need to be better, I need to have stuck at this career for longer or whatever, your book will inform you just as you are writing it.
100%. Yes. And you'll know when it's right too. Like I knew, okay, it's time to buckle down and revamp this book, or give it a facelift, I called it.
I call them practice books. A lot of
the first books.
Yeah, a lot of us publish like a practice book, and everything is new when you're writing your first book. So it's not just about the writing, it's not just about the editing, it's everything. Every single little part of the book writing process is brand new to you. So like you can't be expected to be confident in it because you've never done it before. But yeah, like a lot of us I've done a practice book. I've published a very long time ago a book that I call my practice book. I haven't had the guts to yet publish my big book, so that also needs to be coming. But like you get a little bit of a taster of like I said, just how bad and scary and all the things that self-publishing for the first time can be. You know what to expect. So I think the resistance actually increases for the second book, but a second book is a different story, because you know you've already got that basis for what the book is.
Right. And it's a whole different caliber too. I feel like the way we approached it and all the other individuals involved as far as the back end process of publishing the book, you know, again with typesetters and proofreaders and
much bigger team of people.
Illustrators. I have a lot of illustrations, so that's another thing, like illustrators and especially anatomy illustrations, when you have an illustrator that isn't an anatomist.
I couldn't go anywhere public to edit when I was working on your book. I was firmly in my home office because all these diagrams would pop up and I'm just like, this might not be best for the kids sitting in the cafe behind me.
That's right. Unless you have those screen protectors. Or like, you know, those that block out your screen. But no, totally. So a lot went into this, into these books, and I'm very happy now with where it's at the moment, and I'm gonna let this one ride for a while unless something again drastically changes or there's a significant new insight. But
you make a pill that just solves it.
Yeah, right. And then this is not applicable, and that could be it, and that's great, you know, and people getting help.
It's a very short book. It's just one page.
Very short book. This pill. Yeah. But yeah, and who knows, like the other thing that I don't know if any of your other authors or writers have experienced that, but what do you do with the first edition? You know, like, do you take it off Amazon? Do you take it off from being available for purchase, or do you have now 2 books that one's the first edition, one's the second edition? And I grappled with that for a little bit, and I ended up taking down the first edition just because I thought, you know, I really, there's, from what I know, there were some inaccuracies in that, or at least I could have said it a little differently to relay the message. And I just wasn't like, I wasn't happy with that. Now that I have this one, I was like, no, we're just going to keep one version, you know, this version.
I think most people, once a new edition becomes available, the assumption from a reader's point of view, from a publishing point of view, is that the old edition is no longer available in its like direct purchase form. Like obviously you can get first editions of books that are originals, but yeah, I think the assumption is that there are no previous versions of it available for sale. But as far as, you know, unpublishing, as far as like making anything not available that you have changed, making old books that you aren't sort of your best work anymore as who you are today, and whether you want to carry on selling them at a lower price or anything like that, I don't see that there's anything wrong with that, as long as, you know, there aren't, like you said, inaccuracies, but is that best practice? I guess it's all part of a strategy. Like, what strategy do you want to just have as much out there as possible, or is quality the most important thing to you? Is being up to date the most important thing to you? So I think that would probably be a matter of, you know, strategy and your messaging as well. Are the things that you've got out there still aligned with who you are, and that kind of thing. But yeah, definitely for the same book, I think people would do what you did, which is remove the old version. Good launch strategy as well to do that. This old one's disappearing.
Right.
Well, I will link everybody up with your book, and make sure everyone knows where to get it. If anybody is interested in a really, really good job of referencing and endnotes and you know, looking at what a second edition looks like, also get Susie's book. Or if you're not in the kind of body that we've just been talking about, but you are interested in pain and psychology, I would definitely recommend it as a good read in that respect, because I learned a lot just about managing pain, really, in general. So I'll make sure everyone knows where to get it. And thank you so much for joining us today. It's been really good to talk about second editions and past selves.
Yes. Thank you so much, Kris. It was a pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.